Hi, this is Steve Hargadon, and it is the 23rd of December 2011, and I'm here with Audrey Waters to talk about education, ed tech, and the final year wrap-up
Yes,
ideas.
yes, I think this will be our last podcast of the year. So
You did add another top 10 list.
I did. I'm done.
You didn't call it number 11, though.
No.
Okay, so your last top 10 list, top 10 ed tech startups of 2011. How did you have the time to go through all of the startup companies?
Well, this is something that I've been tracking on all year. And I think I've been thinking about this series of posts for a long time now. But in particular, just all throughout the year, I've met a lot of really, really great entrepreneurs doing interesting things. And so when I sort of sat down to focus on some of the most ones that were the most exciting to me, it took a while, but it took actually a lot of careful consideration. But I think I came up with a really good list of.
It is a good list,
Yeah.
even with all of your
I
disclaimers
know.
about not being too scientific and not really fully being in the year 2011, but
Right.
close.
Well,
Uh,
this is one of the things that is funny about, the technology world in particular. I think that this word startup gets bandied around, and you find companies that are still called people call Facebook still a startup. And so I wanted to sort of just limit the ones that I was looking at, the companies I was looking at, to ones that were founded or launched this year. Because it's not, in some ways, it doesn't feel fair to compare a company, with sort of two employees, a hacker and a hustler, with somebody who's got, raised $34 million in funding. So,
well, so I'm very interested in kind of the scope here. And you're going to talk about I think, some really fun startups. But one of the things that occurs to me about the education world is that it's a highly institutionalized buying process.
hmm
So a startup seems to almost have less chance of succeeding in that environment than they would sort of in the general marketplace. Is there a degree to which, a lot of the startup activity is actually just going to end up getting gobbled up by big companies?
that's actually, I think, one of the interesting changes that we're seeing right now, and I think one of the really exciting changes that we're seeing right now in education technology, because I think for the first time there is a consumer web market, or a market for consumer web apps that would can support a lot more educational content. And whether that means parents and students are purchasing it, or teachers are purchasing these out of their pockets, but it actually sort of bypasses some of that enterprise, that old enterprise model. But yeah, I do think some of these companies will be gobbled up. I think some of the things that they offer are really just features that other large
Mm.
companies could probably add.
That's what worries me a little, is that you develop a really cool feature. Let's say it's a texting service.
hmm
The resources required to market that into the school uh, ecosystem are so substantial, and the scale that's needed is so huge. Aren't these ideas just going to get kind of absorbed into other products without the startup companies getting the benefit?
I think that I would say that if some of these large enterprise mega education companies were nimble enough and innovative enough and actually interested in doing those things, the world would probably be a much better place. I don't know that I don't know that actually a lot of I don't think it would be so easy, for example, for Pearson to buy a company like Desmos, one of the startups that I chose. I just don't think that the innovation that I see in Desmos would ever live in Pearson.
Interesting. It's a very encouraging vision. I really hope it's true. Although there's sort of this cycle I continue to see in my life that maybe we even see played out sort of in the internet, of this sort of feeling of, okay, we can all innovate and it's all going to be good and everybody's going to get rewarded. And then things sort of settle back down to who's actually got the money.
Well, and I think that money piece is a big question, and how, particularly startups that haven't worked out their funding, their sort of their revenue model, like how really are they going to make it as a company? It's particularly if they're free to start, and sort of down the road, down the road someday they'll figure out how they're going to make money.
Yeah, hard. Okay, so launch toys. Um, and a connection to Seymour Papert.
Yes.
Wow, this is terrific.
Yeah, Andy Russell is great. He's the co-founder of Launchpad Toys, and they make an iPad app. They have several more apps sort of in the works, and it's a cartoon, sort of a digital storytelling cartoon building app. He's actually a former. He actually worked for an. I think he worked for Hasbro, but I'll say he worked for a well-known toy maker, and he has an interesting history of thinking about what it means to build toys that help kids learn through imaginative play. And I think he has an interesting way of thinking about how new tools like the iPad and the app market mean that people can build cool tools without having to worry about sticking them in a box on a shelf and appealing to a different sort of marketing. So he's just a really interesting, smart guy who's been building toys for a while, and I love their app. I love the Toontastic app. It is one of my favorites, and I think Apple actually chose it as one of their best education apps this year too.
You mentioned Desmos and a graphing calculator that I couldn't tell from the story, but does it work sort of on all the platforms? It kind of addresses the BYOD issue.
It does, and it's this is one of those examples where kids are still asked to go out and buy the graphing calculator once they hit middle school, and this is this is the BYOD that we've already been up to, and Texas Instruments and some of these companies, they have not innovated at all for years. And Eli, the co-founder of Desmos, he's a double major at Yale, majoring in math and engineering. And this is actually not even the main product that he's building. He just sort of built this incredibly cool, free, web-based graphing calculator. And you can tell that a math whiz built it because it does all the cool things that really you don't even see in a Texas Instruments calculator. It's very cool.
I'm going to juxtapose that story with the Microsoft social network because we don't really need to talk anymore about Microsoft's social initiatives. But what was so interesting to me was that the Microsoft story leads you to kind of think that we're really sort of a peak social need. And I kept thinking, things come out of the blue that so dramatically change things. And then here's this graphing calculator, and you think, this is one of those things where we've just been in such a mindset
Yes.
that providing this, which is literally going to be free instead of this cost, is such a significant move. There are so many of those waiting for us.
Well, I mean, and adding the social piece to it too. I mean, the with a web-based graphing calculator, you can share your solutions. And, you can embed your solutions on a website. I mean, it's exciting. So.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn because the Microsoft story also reminded me that there's a big difference between building systems for people and teaching people to build on their own. And social media feels very much like it's a hacking environment. You learn to use RSS, you cobble together different tools, and you get this wonderful output. And yet I worry a little about that sort of same hacking ethos when it comes to something like the Raspberry Pi, or Scratch, where we don't really adopt that widely in education. So we're on kind of a high with the social media hacking, but do these products that allow for hacking in education, are they actually going to see any adoption?
Well, one of the things I love about Little Bits, which is another one of the startups on my list, is I think that Little Bits sort of addresses one of the hurdles why we actually don't see more hardware hacking. And that's that I think that there still is, well, I mean, I just don't think that a lot of K-12 classroom teachers have experience working with circuitry in that way. And I think that there's still a lot of fear, fear about doing certain kinds of hands-on projects like that in the classroom. And I love Little Bits because it's actually a way to build and work with circuitry that doesn't require a soldering iron. And it doesn't seem like it would be that huge of a sort of a mental barrier, but I think it really is for some people who've never sort of done that sort of thing before. And so little bits, there are all these cool circuit boards that you can connect together, and they work with magnets.
Yeah, I loved that, and you loved it as well because it was woman owned,
Right.
and but I read the surveys and I think homeschool market. I don't think traditional school. I'm thinking, oh, who's going to actually go out and do that? But that may not be fair. But I also worry that lack of lesson plans and integration into sort of these larger systemic ways of thinking about education, hamper these kind of hacking project, the potential of these. Okay, highlighter.
Yeah.
Hasn't this been done about 1 million times?
I think that a lot of people are working on various elements around social reading, for example. I mean, that would be something like Goodreads, where you can let other people know what you're reading and share your favorite passages, and sort of have an online forum to discuss a book. One of the things I like about Highlighter is that they've built a little JavaScript. It's just a line of JavaScript that you insert into your website or your blog, and it allows that sort of margin comment to happen right on the page, which is, I really like it in an academic setting as well. I think about someone who taught. I taught writing for a number of years, and it's never the comment at the end of the paper that's helpful on an essay. It's the comments that you make, all over the essay in the margins. And I think that one of the things you notice on the internet is you get comments at the end of stories, but you never get sort of a closer reading and a closer way of looking at the tool. And Highlighter's building the tool for professors in just that sort of scenario to share and encourage close reading and comments with their classes. So
fascinating. Is it Selly or Chelly?
I think Selly.
Okay, so text messaging. What do you like so much about Selly?
Well, text messaging was one of the trends that I chose this year, and I think it's something that, we talked about that before. It's sort of the nexus of all of these different things: mobile learning, BYOD, and the fact that teens text. What I love about this startup is that it has really incredibly amazing technology under the hood. A lot of the startups that have built text messaging tools this year have used another company called Twilio. And Twilio offers telecommunications. It's a very simple telecommunications API. In fact, folks might have heard about it. NPR had a story about call and oats the other day. I don't know if you heard it, Steve. It was like if you call in this 1-800 number, you can press 1 to listen to different Hall and Oates. Different Hall and Oates songs of your choice. But anyways, it's a very simple API that allows you to do all sorts of voice messaging and texting features. So most people have built their educational text messaging app on Twilio. And what Selly has done is they've built a completely different infrastructure, and it's federated. It has abilities to work a bit like Yahoo Pipes or RSS even, where you can feed in different information and direct it out in different ways. So I just think that there's a lot of interesting technology that's going on in Selly that makes it definitely rise above some of the others in their same space.
How fun. And sort of speaking of those innovations that occur that you don't expect, I had that this week with a text messaging app. I love text messaging. I've used another app called HeyTell for voice messaging. Mm-hmm. And this week discovered one called You Gotta Talk, which is only Android. But the brilliance for me was it fully integrates with your existing text messaging. So it replaces your text messaging app. If you send a message to someone who doesn't have the app, it just sends it as a regular text message. But if they have the app, it then sends through their network. And I was like, wow, now I get it. This whole idea of alternate messaging systems, right. If they actually work in combination with your existing one, brilliant. I'm just stunned. It lets you send pictures or voice audio messages or everything else. But the fact that it integrated with my existing text messaging system, I was kind of blown out of the water again by the innovation in texting.
Yeah. No, I think that some folks are sort of wishing texting would go away, but I think it's actually a very powerful tool that that we haven't really invested enough energy in figuring out yet. Partially because I think geeks are already on to the next, they're on to the next thing. But
Okay, Goal Book really interested me.
yeah,
A way of keeping track of individual education plans. Um, I wondered if, in addition to this, there's thought going into students kind of managing their own learning plans.
I think that that would probably be something that this company could probably tackle in the future. They're a really interesting startup insofar as that the that Daniel, one of the co-founders, was a special education teacher for a number of years and is also a computer science engineer. And so he's actually building a solution to the problem that he faced as a classroom teacher, which I think is I think is really there's a lot to be said for that. And it's at this stage, it's really about working with special needs kids and making sure that all of the different adults that have say over some aspect of a student's world can actually communicate easily with each other.
And I'm assuming that if that student moves to another school, that the brilliance of that is that data would still be
Yes,
available.
exactly. And parents can access it. And I mean, I just think that things, you know, schools, very bureaucratic institution, and things get siloed, and you'll find that someone's speech pathologist has never actually talked to the behavior specialist, who's never, who maybe once in a while would report back to the main classroom teacher, but certainly people aren't on the same page for an individual student enough. And this tool helps to address that.
Yeah, I loved it. And in a world that's increasingly, I think, going to go to individual education plans for every student,
Mm-hmm.
seems like a great foundation for thinking about that.
Yeah.
Okay, finally our favorite, my favorite, maybe yours, Lesson Cast.
Yes. Yes.
Tell us about it.
So I met the founding team this summer. They actually first pitched this startup at a startup weekend EDU that I attended in San Francisco. Even though the team is from Baltimore, they came out to San Francisco to participate in Startup Weekend EDU. And the minute that Nicole Smith pitched her idea on a Friday night, I knew that I knew a couple of things. I knew it was a great idea, but I also knew that sort of if it were me, like I would be on Nicole's team. She just had such a clear vision as a teacher herself about what needed to happen in order to fix what is going to be an increasingly common problem, particularly as we have more and more TFA type teachers, which is that you're a new teacher, you don't necessarily have someone in your building even that you can turn to for sort of simple hints and tricks about how to get things done in the classroom, lesson plan ideas, classroom management skills. The tool is just a very easy way for teachers to sort of share that kind of knowledge with each other. And and as you make these videos, it's sort of a PD. The professional development is also in thinking through making the video as well as a tool for others.
I loved it because it's crowdsourced PD.
Yeah.
And that to me makes so much sense. And especially when you compare it to kind of the financially structured selling of lesson plans
Right.
in these different networks that just never seem to me to really hit the core piece of how educators want to connect with each other.
Yeah.
Okay, so then now the big story, moving on from the top 10 ed tech startups, MIT X.
Yeah.
So is X now the de facto indicator of a replicable, smaller scale something or something?
I That's funny. I this story broke as technology journalists or as journalists in general sort of are loath to do. There's a thing you're supposed to do every Sunday night at about midnight on the East Coast, 9 o'clock here on the West Coast. You're supposed to look and see what the Wall Street Journal stories have crossed the line, because they always tend to post them really late at night on a Sunday, my time. And sure enough, this crossed the wire. Crossed the wire late Sunday night, and I thought, well, I have to talk to some people before I write up my thoughts on it. But I did go into my Photoshop, and I actually took a picture of Vin Diesel from the Triple X movie, and thought I'm just going to make a tattoo on the back of his neck that says MITx. But then I realized that it was probably the TEDx was the reference I was supposed to be thinking about, not the Vin
Well, there
Diesel.
has been an MITx for years and years, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
is it a different beast entirely?
I think this is a different beast. I think this is very much on the notion of it of well, I don't know. I mean, I think this is a new initiative. This is MIT sort of taking their they've been a leader in terms of open courseware, and this is another stab on their part to sort of try to be at the forefront of what's happening with open education. So they'll be offering a certificate for people who successfully complete and then pay for pay for the certificate for these online classes that they'll be building. Much akin to the Stanford classes, it sounds like.
Right. So you're paying for certification. That's not necessarily a credit
No,
or a degree, but
no,
it's some form of validation that you actually accomplish some amount of work.
right, right. And what it sounds like, I mean, and this is something that the Stanford AI class did as well, is it sounds like what MIT is doing is building out. They're building out an online platform to sort of run these classes, but they're also building out an assessment feature, so an artificial intelligence assessment feature, so that they can easily scale the grading of course materials, of assignments. I mean,
It was interesting to think about this because I thought, okay, so if you're in a trust relationship with someone, that kind of credentialing or certification probably is valuable, but it probably doesn't meet the standard for a stranger, right? So I could, if I have somebody who's in my office and they get this credential, okay, great. That sort of indicates achievement, but maybe not necessarily across sort of regular boundaries for us.
yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't know. I tend to think that a certificate, and MIT says that this actually isn't going to even say MIT. I mean, they want it's going to be clear that this is MITx, the certificate that you'll get, and likewise, the letter that you get from participating in the Stanford class. The Stanford AI class was also a letter from the professors. It wasn't a letter from Stanford saying that you'd successfully completed the class. But I have to wonder, because of the elite stature of those two schools, that will count. I mean, I think that if you had a job applicant who, if you were hiring someone, and you had a choice of someone with a bachelor's degree from a state college, a bachelor's degree in computer science, or a letter from Stanford and a letter from MIT saying that they'd taken these online informal classes, I think that they would count.
Yeah, but again, maybe it's the suspicious nature of mine. But how would you know that they actually did the work and there isn't somebody in India grinding these out and getting certificates in other people's names?
That's true. I mean, but I think that that's probably something that you can think about. I mean, I think that this is sort of raises questions we talked about last week too. Like, what is the value of a college degree too? I mean, I think that I think we're starting to question a lot what any of these certifications might mean.
So do you think that MITx should marry the Mozilla Open Badges project, and then the two will happily create all these children of validated alternate certifications?
Well, this is. I mean, I think that this is actually a really interesting development that's that's different from the MIT system. I mean, I think that it is certainly all these alternative forms of credentialing that we're seeing right now, but the MIT one, the MIT one is going to cost money, and I mean, I wrote about this in another story this week. I don't know what I think about. I don't know what I think about this sort of open education resources now. The credentials. I don't know what it
Have a fee associated with
have
them.
a fee associated with them.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think we're going to really see this story unfold until the tuition bubble pops.
Hmm.
But when it does, I think it's going to move fast.
I think we'll see. I mean, I actually think it's. I think we're on the cusp of it, and I've heard rumors that we're actually going to see a couple of other very prestigious universities doing a similar move this year.
Interesting.
But again, I think it's something with the prestige of the prestige of those universities too. Like I'm not sure, I'm not sure if a lesser known
Right.
smaller state school could do this sort of thing, and I don't know if it would mean the same.
Well, I will say that for me, it probably will open the door to some smaller institutions leapfrogging, meaning if they can figure out how to do this and do it well, that they have a chance to significantly change their stature if they can produce results that really make a difference.
Yeah, yeah, and produce results that make a difference is this interesting question too, because are we seeing are we suddenly getting fixated again on the certification piece, and how is that different from producing results? Like, is producing
Right.
results getting graduates or diploma people who hold a diploma, or I think that it's going to be a really interesting. I mean, I think next year is going to be really interesting for higher education.
Can't wait. Okay, so I read the OER and education inequality story very carefully because having been involved in the open source movement for a long time, I've kind of wondered about the impact of especially open source software and costs inequality. And I know that the concern here is that OER might actually be expanding inequality. I'm going to say I don't think it widens the gap. It just makes the differences more stark. Is that a reasonable approach to this question?
Yeah, I thought that this story has been sort of I've been just stewing on this story for a long time, and this is based on Justin Reich's research, and he's actually looked at a really substantial body of substantial sort of number of students and their use of wikis in particular, and he's looking at the ways in which different students from different backgrounds have access to use wikis, and this was his conclusion. Is that, I mean, certainly open education and resources aren't hurting anybody, but but more affluent students benefit more from them. It's actually and it's actually sort of reinforcing and perhaps even widening disparity.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think that there are some really interesting comments on my story, and I think that one of the things that Jim Groom points out is that these are the things that are happening all over the place. This is something that technology helps. The technology helps sort of widen these divides already. We're seeing these massive inequalities all over the place. I'm not sure we can sort of blame OER, and I'm not sure that's actually what Justin Reich is necessarily doing. But I do think we always do need to be mindful about sort of how are we particularly how are we working with technology in the classroom in a way that sort of we're only giving certain students access to certain students have access to tools. Certain students, perhaps like the advanced placement students, get access to better equipment and stuff like that. So I think it's a good reminder to always be mindful of those things.
Yeah, I worried, again, we've talked about red herrings before. I worried that the whole story was a little bit of a red herring because the inequality is really in the quality of teaching. For me, and not the resources themselves. And if anything, I think you could make the counter argument that, like with Microsoft Office and Open Office, there hasn't been a lot of wide adoption of Open Office, but it really drove the price of Microsoft Office down. So I feel like there's sort of another side to if you're looking at the actual sort of cost, but if the core question is usage, that to me was really sort of a teaching issue. And there's a
Hmm.
clear inequality in teaching because I'm not convinced you need wikis to teach well.
Right.
I think they do a lot of things, but to me the core inequality is, the time and attention a teacher is taking to the education of the students.
Right. I mean, and I think that that's, yeah, I mean, I think that that's something that's, is, although, well, I don't know. I mean, I think that there are probably ways, it's hard to think, is that something that proprietary content would do the same as open content? Or is there something about open content and the way you can reuse, mix, mash it up, mix it up, share it in new ways that actually is makes it different than proprietary content? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so the argument would be that it makes that quality of teaching difference even greater.
Right.
Yeah, fascinating story. Okay, so why were you initially so upset about the new Lego for girls?
Well, the Lego has Lego has I love Lego. I mean, I'm 40 and I remember getting my very first Lego set when I was probably 5. And so I've grown up loving Lego. My son has grown up loving Lego. I'm now buying Lego for nieces and nephews. And when I heard that Lego was making sets for girls, my first response was, wait, that's Lego. Like, the bricks that you build, that's for girls too. But, but the fact of the matter is, Lego has really gone sort of, Lego has become a very gendered toy. And it isn't sort of that boys build and girls play with dolls. The sets that Lego's producing right now are very warlike. There's ninjas, there's, rockets, there's space battles, there's pirates, there's knights in castles. And I think that Lego isn't really for everyone the way in which I wish it was. Lego's done a lot of research. They've made some new sets in order to actually go after that girl market. They've made the dolls a little bit taller and very curvy, and they have painted, smiling faces, not just the sort of the two dots for an eyes that the little minifigs have, and they're little sets. And they're little sets of girls, a little girl that's a beautician and a little girl that's a vet, and there's a girl that's an inventor, and they're pink and pastel colored, and I just felt this made me a little sad.
It's a fascinating topic in the combination of sort of cultural and cognitive science. I remember thinking when I graduated from college in the early 1980s that we had really finally overcome the women's issues, right? To then watch Britney Spears for the next 20 years just drive us back down to the same drain. So I've decided that if I want my boy children to go to college, I'll have them play with a girl Lego set, right?
Well, I mean, I think I I think that it's interesting to sort of see Lego. Lego talked a lot of has been talking about some of the research that they've done, and I think that Lego's Lego's right that girls do prefer pink doll like toys, but I think it's part of such a larger cultural issue. And it just concerns me that once we start giving sort of again the it seems like that Legos falling into the trap again that boys build with their Legos and that girls play dolls with their Legos. And if indeed Lego is this great path to getting students to thinking seriously about STEM careers, which the Lego First Robotics is a stellar program in that stead. If I worry that those new sets for girls aren't going to be the kind of thing that makes a young girl say, "Yeah, I think I would like to build with Legos." Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, maybe it will.
Okay, so we'll leave that one because it's going to come up again. Okay, so $1 trillion spending bill, but no money for ed tech.
Yeah, I mean, I think that and money, lots more money for Race to the Top. So the Obama administration sort of signature education funding contest did get more money, but no money. The one of the education technology programs actually was cut last year, and no specific line item in the budget for ed tech. I don't know if that's necessarily. I think that makes an interesting headline. I don't think that it means that the current administration is sort of anti-technology, but it certainly does raise questions about where the priorities are in terms of the technology in the classroom is certainly going to be used for more standardized testing. It's probably not going to be used for the innovative things that the ARPA Ed agency was talking about.
I appreciated the control that you must have exerted to not place the cheating scandal story right below that story. The self-control of separating them. Another Georgia cheating scandal.
Another cheating scandal. And I think that I think we're only going to see more cheating scandals. I mean, you and I have talked about this several times. All of the factors that are in place right now to encourage just this sort of behavior. So I think that as long as sort of your local education journalist is going to be looking for these sorts of things, I bet we turn up a lot more of these in the new year.
Yeah, I read the Washington Post story and I was fascinated by it. One of the lessons they claimed was that schools shouldn't be responsible for policing themselves, meaning they should have other policing bodies, which kind of stunned me just in and of itself. How do we get so far off base here? They claim a failure of leadership by the principals and administrators. And I thought, well, it is a failure of leadership, but it's not, and it is a failure of leadership at that level. But is that the kind of leadership we should be asking for? And is it a failure of leadership at an even higher level?
Right. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we were thinking about the local school board member that took his state test. I think that there's a failure of leadership in terms of sort of almost every adult as well, to not be asking more questions about really the path that we're going down when what we talk about in terms of students, the way in which our students are spending time in classroom is so much revolves around these tests. I saw someone tweeted the other day that I think that they tweeted that their 8-year-old was spending 3 hours taking finals this week. Uh-huh. What do you? Third grade has finals now? Boy.
Crazy. Okay, tutor spree. It reminded me that I haven't really tracked the tutoring market, but there's for a long time been a paid tutoring market online. How are these services doing?
Yeah, I think that the tutoring market, the Better Business Bureau constantly rates the tutoring companies and some of the well-known tutoring companies, with D's or F's. The tutoring market, online and offline, I think is pretty poor. There's some interesting movements in both areas. Tutor spree is actually more like I would say it's almost more like a it's like Craigslist with better profiles. This is for offline tutoring, helping people match people in their local communities with more reputable tutors. So it doesn't actually.
Interesting.
It's not. I wouldn't say that it's terribly disruptive or interesting, but I do think that in general, there's probably a lot of cleaning up to do in terms of tutoring, particularly online.
Google Books can be now read offline. Are these the copyrighted books, or the ones you buy, or the public domain ones? Which books can you now read offline?
These are the ones through Google eBooks. So it would be either ones that you purchase from them and read through their web-based reader, or some of the public domain ones as well. So it's just one of these innovations, thanks to HTML5, that allows for offline reading.
Gotcha. But it doesn't mean you're going to be able to read offline those books that are where you just see the snippets.
Correct.
That are still protected.
Correct.
And one laptop per child still chugging along. I didn't know that.
It is still chugging along, and it's interesting. Back to the top, the my choice for top startups of the year. I mean, I think that we're definitely we're seeing several interesting pieces of technology that are bringing the costs down lower and lower. That I have to wonder at what point one laptop per child is going to sort of be beaten to the punch by some of these other companies and other technologies. But the latest version of the laptop just passed the FCC, and I believe that they're going to start distributing them soon.
Yeah, I was reminded of just sort of how significantly my thinking shifted on this issue when I sat next to this guy on an airplane who works for Amazon, and he was talking about providing Kindles in low-income villages.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought how much simpler a solution that is and how much more impactful it probably is. I don't know that that's actually accurate, but the idea of having a school have a repository of potentially thousands of books in these devices felt to me like it might even be more valuable than the laptops, and surprised me.
Yeah, I think that this latest Exo laptop has the hand cranked power, which is an interesting development too. And I mean, I think that that's one of the problems that even the Kindle with its great battery life. I mean, at some point you have to charge these
Mm,
devices, and so are we going to be able to lower the power, the computing power, to such a point where they can be recharged through solar? Oh.
interesting. You mentioned an Android quiz and poll app, and I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't find it in my app marketplace. Is this a Google product?
It is a Google product, but that's the Android marketplace is such a wonderfully well
Disorganized?
organized. I
Could you
mean,
please just allow me to sort the results based on number of downloads and popularity? I
I
mean,
know.
hello?
You would think for a company that sort of likes to boast that it's good at search, that it wouldn't be such a complete and utter nightmare to search through its app marketplace. Yeah, this is the tool that Google has built internally. But honestly, I didn't even look to see if it was easily findable.
I didn't do anything more than just search my marketplace because I thought, wow, this is terrific. I mean, a polling response app for school in an Android phone
Hmm.
could have a pretty significant impact, but I
Right.
couldn't find it. Well, I hope we will. Hey, any follow up to that K-12 story?
I haven't heard anything else about it. Have you?
No. In fact, I bookmarked the site so I could read it because I wanted to read all 300 and something comments. And of course, that's been so imposing that I haven't actually gotten to reading it. Sort of the opposite. The thing that always happens to me is the more important the story, the less I actually pay attention because of the time involved. But no, I didn't know if there was anything more that had happened.
I haven't heard anything. No.
So on sort of our final note, you managed to somehow bring football back in.
I did. I did. I couldn't help with this one, particularly since it was research based out of my alma mater here at the University of Oregon. Three psychology researchers found something that I think shocks no one, that the better college football team does, the lower the male GPA is.
It actually did surprise me.
Oh, did it?
And I'll tell you why, because I've always had this theory that uh, the sort of aggregate psyche of a university is largely impacted by how their sports teams do. And I kind of thought that if your team is losing, that everybody would kind of get depressed and that might actually have an impact. But this shows I'm wrong.
Well, this is sort of. I talk a lot about sort of my experience teaching at the University of Oregon and the sort of the way in which I saw things change after the school started to become more of a powerhouse in football, and so I've always felt anecdotally that I felt that students' grades were going down. But here we go,
Is it the
scientific proof.
partying?
Yes, it is the partying. It is the partying.
Audrey, thanks again for a terrific week of stories. Again, your insight is so helpful, and I appreciate that you take the time to do this.
Well, thanks. It's been fun. So I guess we're taking next week off, but we'll have stuff in the new year, predictions and
Happy Happy holidays.
Likewise.